All right, good afternoon, everybody. Oh, I noticed I'm a little bit off center right now. Sorry, today is going to be a really good stream. At least I'm hoping so. I'm always excited to do one of these streams, but today in particular is probably the most excited I've ever been to do a stream, and it's going to be a good one. So today we are going to be talking about my venture in building a home lab. Now, you might be noticing that my camera is in a weird position today, and that'll make sense here in a minute. Yeah, so we got a lot of content to cover today, and this is just going to be part one of this stream. This will probably be a series that's going to probably run through the end of the year, and then have adjacent streams. But yeah, let's talk about what we're going to cover today, and then we're just going to jump right into things because we need to get going. Lot to cover. So the topics we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about what a home lab is, my intentions for my home lab, resources that help me to kind of think through how I want to build my home lab. And then finally, we'll spend the bulk of the time actually doing a deep dive review of all the hardware itself. So you might be wondering, well, why is my microphone here and kind of like obscuring my face right now? And that's because I'm going to swing it around, and I'll show it for now, but like we'll get back to this in a little bit. Off to my left here, I have like a demo station of like, there's like a folding table over here, and I got a webcam that's pointing directly down. So I'm actually going to show all the hardware over here when we get to that. But first, I'm going to stick over on this side, and then we'll shift things over there in a few minutes. So let's talk about first, what is a home lab? So a home lab, this is not to be confused necessarily with building a PC, because like when people build like hardware like things like this, generally they think about PCs, and this is not a PC per se. Like well, we're not building a PC. What we're building is basically our own private infrastructure thing. And so the term that has become colloquial known, it has become colloquial known as is just as a home lab. So this is something that you would build and maintain on your own. Usually this is just for hobbyist kind of things. And my purposes, we'll talk a little bit more about my intention in a minute, but for my purposes, it is going to be a hobbyist kind of thing. But just to show you like what is a real deal kind of server rack look like, as opposed to like a home lab. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So this is more or less an example of a server rack. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but this thing, usually server racks are pretty big. Like they're the size of like a wardrobe, or even maybe a small closet. But you can see here that don't worry about too much about these words. I'm not necessarily covering this. I just want to kind of show this picture for you to get a sense of like what a real deal production grade server might look like. And that is, so you can see, it might be hard to tell, but like we have all these different racks of different things here, and they're all mounted together up by screws and stuff. And each of these things supports a different thing. So like there might be a couple of like power thing. Like I think this is an AI generated image, just judging based off of this, but no worries. I'm not too fixated on this image per se, but you might have power sources. You might have some networking kinds of things. And then you might actually have the servers themselves. Now, if as I was looking at this picture, I was reminded of the TV show Silicon Valley, where so this kind of a light spoiler, but eventually, like in like season 3, I think it is, they build like the box. And the box is the box is actually equivalent to like one of these things that you might mount in like one of these like production grade server racks. So that makes me want to rewatch Silicon Valley again. But anyway, so that is at a high level what a home lab is. So I am going to be building one for myself. So let's talk a little bit about my intentions with my home lab. So the first thing I want to call out is, obviously I am not going to build something that big that we were just showing. Like I don't have the space, I don't have necessarily the money to be able to do something like that. I want something that I can sit on. Well, actually, I'll just go ahead and show it. So I want it to sit right here. Like, I don't know if you can see behind me, there's like a spot that I've cleared on my shelves. And I did some measurements. So I think it's about 18 inches from this shelf up to this shelf. It might be a little bit less than that. And then left to right is another, I don't know, 1.5 feet or so. If you keep going, I got my Lego set that's like right next to it. So that is constraint number 1 for me, is it's got to fit in that space. And then the other thing that I want to be able to do is I want to be able to, because you can build your own private lab that it just is consistent of like one computer or one computational device. With my home lab, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to emulate at a bare minimum a Kubernetes cluster. And I'm not going to necessarily go into what a Kubernetes cluster today is, but a high level, a Kubernetes cluster is basically a combination of computers, if you will, where you can actually network them all together and then they can all operate together as like one individual thing. And so with my home lab, I don't necessarily need a high level of computational ability. And so you might be wondering, well, I do a lot of AI stuff. Am I going to do any sort of AI thing on the home lab? And in terms of things like LLM hosting, I am not. And the reason for that is, again, you really need really specialized hardware to be able to sufficiently run an LLM. And then I was looking into like the DGX Spark. So if you've seen like what the DGX Spark is, it's this really tiny little box. Oops. No, my microphone there. Really tiny little box. About the, I don't know how to compare it. It's a little bit shorter than a Mac Mini, but a little bit wider than a Mac Mini. It's about the same size, or more or less equivalent of like the older style Mac Minis, because now they're like the Apple TV size, but they used to be a little bit flatter, a little bit wider. But the thing with that is they're $3,500 or maybe even more. And it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how fast this thing is going to get outdated. So I personally am not worrying about any sort of LLM hosting. What I want to host on this is, I already mentioned, of course, the Kubernetes cluster. I also want to, we've been going through like the MLflow series, which by the way, we will be getting back to that with the one last stream on the generative AI side of MLflow. So we've been like, if you've been watching the MLflow stream, we stood up our own MLflow server just locally on our MacBooks or I guess our local laptops. And I'd like to be able to host that on there. I would like to be able to demonstrate like how I would host other Docker containers, other things like that, but nothing that's necessarily so computationally intensive that I can't, like I need really specialized hardware for that. So most people, when they build like a basic home lab, they rely on Raspberry Pis. And that's actually going to be what I'm going to do as well. So my home lab is essentially going to consist of 4 different Raspberry Pis. They're all going to be networked together, and then they're all going to be put into a small form factor that can sit over on my shelf here, plus some other little fun things, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But before I get into the hardware, let me just check. Oh yeah, I want to cover the resources that were helpful for me. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. Now, I did extensive research on what I wanted to build before I actually built anything. So by the way, so if you go up into my GitHub, so this is my GitHub page here. So right here, pinned at the top, you can see that I have my home lab repo here. Now, there's not really much in here at all right now. It's really just a README only right now. But I talk a little bit more about my intention here on what I'm trying to build. I just covered that, and then I'm going to update it with the live streams. And I have a hardware list here, and I'll touch on the hardware. This list, as I stream this right now, is incomplete. I need to go through and update some things. And then we'll cover the helpful resources here in a second. But just want to call out that I am capturing everything. I'll be updating progress along the way within this repo, so if you want to follow along, definitely check that out. So let's talk about some helpful resources. So I found 3 resources that were extremely helpful. Now, the first one is the third one, I'll just call it out really quick, and it's kind of, I don't know what's the word, but it's, I guess, obvious or maybe silly. It was ChatGPT. And when I mean ChatGPT, like I had, I don't know, probably like 50 different, I've had 50 different active threads asking various questions around, what about this hardware versus that hardware? What about my computational needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So ChatGPT was really helpful. But the other 2 sources I want to call out, the first one is Jeff Geerling. Now, if any of you have ever built a home lab before or are interested in like Raspberry Pis and stuff, Jeff Geerling is very much like the guy you go to for that, and he's got a really good YouTube channel as well. I'm starting to learn some things around Ansible, and we'll touch on Ansible perhaps in a future stream. But this is his repo on what he did in terms of building a mini rack. And right away, one thing I want to call off the bat is, so you can see here he's got 2 mini racks side by side. And so you can see like this silver case here with the handles. My case, I'm pretty sure, is the exact same case. It's just that mine is in black. And then But the nice thing about this particular repo is that he has a lot of really, really good information about things you want to consider. So like you can see here, like he talks about like the difference between a 10-inch rack versus a 19-inch rack. So I believe that a standard server rack like this one is more of a 19-incher. Most people, like if they're building a Homelab, they're going to go for a 10-inch form factor, so that is 10 inches in width here. But then you can scroll down here and then start to see like different different things that you can purchase here. Now, one thing I do want to call out here, and I'll show in this picture, so you can see different various components that he's got built in. So this is actually this one on the left here is gonna look kind of similar to the one that I'm building. And you can see here with each of these verticals, these are the 4 Raspberry Pis here. And then he's got them networked together with this switch up here, and we'll talk about my implementation of that here in a little bit. But what I want to call out here is, so you can see that we got each of these rows. Now, whenever you actually start to go and want to purchase your own rack, the way that they measure these in terms of like how much space you need in terms of the height of these things is by a U, like U, and I think U stands for unit. So you can see that this switch here at the top, this is probably a 1U height, whereas like the mount for these Raspberry Pis is a 2U height. Now, in terms of my needs, so if we go back pointing over here where I want to put my Homelab, I can't really go higher than a 4U. Like I think the next size up is like a 6U, and that starts to get too high and would start to hit the top of my, or I guess the bottom of this part of the shelf right here. And so I'm going to stick with 4U. And so let me go back to sharing my screen again. In terms of like all the resources and stuff here, so you can see that he's got 10-inch mini racks here. Now he's got a whole list of a bunch of different sizes that you can buy for here. That's what is referring to the unit height. Now you can see that most of these are like 6 or 10 or 8. Like there's not very many 4s. And the reason that I call that out is because, do I want to jump there right now? Hold that thought. I'm actually going to stick here for a minute. Yeah, so there's this. Now, if you actually jump into, if you jump into his GitHub issues, you can see that he's actually got like these build showcases in here. Now he's using his issues more of like as like a documentation board a little bit, but you can actually go through and click through each of these to get a deeper sense of like how to build like a very specific mini rack. So I'm gonna open up this one because this one is probably the closest to mine, the one that I'm gonna be building, with a couple of key differences, of course. But the nice thing is he's got even links to everything. Now, he's got prices on here and I've got prices on mine. I would not read too much into that though, because pricing can change. Like for example, you can see here that he's got 4 Raspberry Pis, 8 gigabytes at $320. Let me tell you now, those are not, so what would that be? 320 divided by 4 is 80. They're not $80 anymore. It's actually close to double that now. But I am going to include prices just in case you're curious. But like, I think it's really nice that he's put together some of these pages. Like if you wanted to replicate his build for one, then you could. So again, really good set of resources, really strong YouTube channel. Can't recommend Jeff Geerling's content enough. And so I guess I want to move now into my other resource that I was largely using. And so this is actually from a friend that I know from my day job. His name is Matt Jarrett. Matt he has his own GitHub page out here as well, in which he's documented things. And you can see here that he's got his Homelab pictured here. Now, my Homelab is going to look very similar to his, with a couple of small differences. And the reason for that is I wasn't necessarily setting out to necessarily copy anybody, but 2 things. Number one, if we come back to here and we were talking about the different heights of things, like there's really just not that many cases available for a 4U height. Like there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4 in here. And I looked at every single one of these and I ended up landing on the one that, you know, Jeff Geerling's using here. I'm using the black one, and then Matt's using the black one as well. And then some of the choices that Matt made in particular over like what Jeff is doing is like I really like what Matt did. Like specifically, you can see here what Jeff did was he has all of the power for each of his Raspberry Pis being powered directly through this looks like a USB sort of wall outlet like thing, whereas Matt is actually doing a power over Ethernet thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But I just think this looks a lot cleaner, and yeah. So, but those are the resources that I largely use to help myself out here, and I've got them linked. Jeff Gerling's content and Matt's content linked in this GitHub as well. So. I don't know if Matt, if you're watching, but huge thank you to you for you putting that guide together. It's been very helpful. And yeah, so let's actually go ahead and start showing. Let's get into the hardware. Let's talk about stuff. So the very first thing, this is going to be a little bit disjointed. I don't necessarily have like a good, like, let's do this, then this, then this. So the first thing I want to show is just the case itself. So this is the case. Now you can see that like there's nothing actually attached to it right now, and that is because I've just had fun, you know, mounting stuff and unmounting it, and then I'm going to remount most of it here in this stream. I guess one caveat I should say is I do not have 100% of the hardware quite yet. Part of that is shipping has just been kind of slow. I don't know why. Like some things have just been like I actually had to go to the post office this morning because I had one thing that was shipped to me, and then the post office like. I guess we got a new carrier or something, and they didn't know where my house was, because I live on the corner of a street where my driveway and my mailbox actually faces one road, but my address is the other corner of the road. So he got confused, and they were going to return it to sender, so I had to run over to the post office and say, no, intercept it, and be like, no, don't send it back to sender. There was a mistake here. Please give it to me. And they did, thankfully. But anyway, so this is the case here. Now, this is the Desk Pi. Let me look at my notes here. And this is what I was mentioning before. There's just not that many options for cases. And in my opinion, this is by far the best case. So this is the Desk Pi Rackmate T0 Plus. Now, Desk Pi is a brand. You can buy a lot of their stuff on Amazon. In fact, like in my GitHub, you can see already, and I'll update everything that pretty much like 90% of the stuff you can buy on Amazon. The only thing you really can't buy is just the Raspberry Pi itself. You can buy full kits of Raspberry Pis, but you can't just buy the single computer by itself. But anyway, so this is the 4U 10-inch mini rack. So this is when we, again, are talking about 10 inches, we're talking about the width here of 10 inches. And so this 4U rack actually comes in a plus variant and a standard variant. You might be wondering, well, what's the difference between the two? And this is the plus variant. The difference is in this depth from back to front. The standard variant only has like 7 inches of depth, whereas this is more, I think this is close to 10. It's not quite a square on the top. And I personally opted for the more depth. Because I just didn't know. I want to kind of be able to future-proof myself a little bit in case I wasn't like, you know, if I wanted to do some more stuff, maybe on the backside or something, then I would have like the additional depth. And I'm glad I did that because, well, you'll see here in a little bit, like, but like the network switch that I got, like it comes with a big meaty power adapter, and I just don't. It would have been hard to cram that all in like the smaller form factor. So. I went ahead and opted for this one here. So this is, again, Desk Pi, or I'm sorry, Geek Pi. Geek Pi is the brand, and I guess Desk Pi is like one of their, I don't know what you want to call it, like label under that brand. I don't know. But Geek Pi has been very, like, but most of the stuff that I've purchased is from Geek Pi directly. So now I'm going to take a minute here. I'm going to start shifting over to the other station. So I'm going to mute for a second. I'm going to shift the camera, and then we'll get going again. Oops. All right, just making sure that everything's looking okay still. Looks like I might need to adjust my camera a little bit there. Okay, so now I am at my side desk. It's like a scissors lift folding table kind of thing that I got on Amazon. It's actually really awesome because it collapses down and it's very easy to like maneuver around. I actually, sometimes I like to work outside on my front porch, and I'll take this folding table out with me. But anyway, so this is, again, the case. So I guess a couple things to call out about the case is, so you can see here at the top we have some handles for nice, easy carrying. We have, of course, all the screw mounts to be able to screw in all the things that we want to be able to add to our rack here. And then it's the same thing on the back too. Hold on, yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's got the same set of screws and stuff on the back. Now, one thing that I found quickly is that, like, so they do provide some mounting screws, but not necessarily enough. So I actually just did, like an hour or so ago, place an order for some additional mounting screws here. So, and then you can see, so most of this is it's some form of steel. It feels really solid. Like the sides, the back, all really solid steel. Now you can kind of tell from the sides that it's got like this clear plastic, but it's like a tinted plastic. And then kind of the same on the top here. So we have like this grating up here on the top, but this is also a clear plastic. And then on the bottom, you can see that we have these other pieces. You can actually mount fans and stuff to like this bottom rack, and this is also metal. It's a little bit thinner of a metal. I personally don't intend to mount anything directly to here, but I did put it on for structural integrity, I guess you'd say. Okay, so that is just the case itself. Now let's move on to, what do I want to move on to next? I want to talk about the computational side of things. So what I have here, this is an older Raspberry Pi. So right now, as I'm recording this, the most modern Raspberry Pi you can get is a Raspberry Pi 5. This is a Raspberry Pi 4 that I purchased, I don't know, I think back in like 2020 or something like that. And it's got a case and stuff around it. And I've been using it for like lightweight testing purpose and stuff. Actually, the original reason I bought it is, so as you probably know, I'm a big iPad coder, and the iPad is limited in its software abilities and what it can and can't do in terms of coding. So I actually found a way online to actually connect this Raspberry Pi directly to the iPad, hardline connection, USB-C to USB-C to USB-C, just from this port on the side here, one of these ports on the side. And then I was able to actually use this as like a computational accessory to the iPad. Now, the reason I stopped doing that was a couple reasons. Number one, it was just not fun to carry around, both of those things. But then the other big one was like, so it was drawing power from the iPad to power this, and that was just killing my iPad battery. So I stopped doing that. I don't actually intend on using this specific Raspberry Pi as part of the cluster. I do plan on using Raspberry Pi 5s for all of them. But I guess something I want to call out is like, I'm not necessarily sure as of right now. I've only purchased one of the Raspberry Pi 5s, and I'll show one of the Pi 5 here in a little bit. But like, I have not yet committed to how much RAM I want in the other Pis. So like, and that's just because, like, again, I don't necessarily intend to run huge computational loads on my cluster. And I'm trying to find that balance of where can I kind of future-proof myself while also trying to save money, recognizing that, you know, the Raspberry Pis, well, anything that has RAM has just gone astronomically high in price recently. So I'm trying to figure that out. But I am currently testing out with this one. Now, something I want to call out about Raspberry Pis, and it's kind of hard to tell in this one just because it's got the case around it. So the Raspberry Pi itself so it has the CPU, it's got memory, of course, but it doesn't necessarily have storage. And when I mean storage, I mean like if you want to save files or whatever, anything else on that. So all Raspberry Pis, I guess I should say at least Raspberry Pi 4s and Raspberry Pi 5s, on the bottom of it, that you have what is over here is a micro SD card reader. I don't know if you could see that very well. So I just have a simple micro SD in this Raspberry Pi, but I don't necessarily want to do that with my cluster. Like this works out for my demo purposes, but this is not like, I'm trying to emulate something close to like a real production grade server as I can, and using, obviously, you probably never hear people using micro SD cards as their storage. So I'll talk a little bit more about what we are going to use instead in a little bit. But just to demo that I am just using just a micro SD card here. Now I am going to plug this in because I want to demo something here in a minute that's going to be pretty cool. Okay, and while that is booting up and stuff, so I got that plugged in, let's actually show off the Raspberry Pi 5. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Now, one thing that we are going to do is we're going to mount this to the rack there. So this is actually going to hold all the Raspberry Pis in place. Again, this was a product made by Geek Pi that I purchased on Amazon. And the cool thing about this is so you can see that here that it can hold 4 Raspberry Pis, and that's got these nice, really nice like protruding screws that you can simply like finger twist on and off. And then it's got like basically like these trays that will hold each of these Pis in place. Now you can see that I've already went ahead and added the risers here, these like copper colored kind of risers. And so that will help to like kind of hold the Raspberry Pi in place, and I'll show that here in a second with the true Raspberry Pi. But I really like this case, although there are a couple bits of, or I'm sorry, this mount. There are a couple of caveats though with this. So let me actually show that. We'll get to the caveats here in a little bit, but let's just show like what the one Raspberry Pi in this mount kind of looks like. And there's a lot going on here, so we'll cover just a couple things at a time. So obviously I've already got this one Raspberry. This is a Raspberry Pi 5 that I am holding, but you can see there's probably a couple of extra things that are aligned to it. So let's just look at the front or the top here. So you can see from the front, this is actually very similar to a Raspberry Pi 4. It's actually a little bit different in the sense that like the Ethernet's actually on the opposite side over here on a Raspberry Pi 4. So you can technically use this same mounting with a Raspberry Pi 4, but again, I'm just choosing to start kind of clean here with Raspberry Pi 5s all across the board. And then you can start to see from the side here, it's going to be hard to tell, but this part that I'm rubbing my finger along, this is the Raspberry Pi itself. So you can see that it's up on risers from this mount side part here. And then a Raspberry Pi itself, if you don't have any case on it or anything, from this side, it's about the size of a credit card or a driver's license or something like that. And then it's pretty flat. Like, so you might be wondering what's all this extra stuff. We'll get to that in a little bit. But otherwise we have, so a standard Raspberry Pi is going to have four USB-A ports. You can see designated by the blue that we got a couple of USB 3.0 ports in here. We have the Ethernet port over here, and then this is going to be kind of hard to see on the side. There's a couple of ports on here. So what I'm rubbing my finger along there, this is a USB port, or I'm sorry, a USB-C port. And this is generally how you power on or provide power to a Raspberry Pi. Although recall that we mentioned that we are going to be doing the power over Ethernet thing, which again we'll get to in a little bit. But then you can also see that we have, I can't remember if these are mini or micro HDMI. There is a difference between mini and micro HDMI, but these two things that I'm rubbing my finger along here. These are mini or micro HDMI ports. Now, you might be seeing that, well, you've got a lot of extra stuff in there. What's going on in there? Well, so one thing I want to call out here with the Raspberry Pi 4 specifically, so I don't know if you can tell, I went ahead and took the lid off this. This Raspberry Pi 4 is a metal case. And the reason I got it is simply, hold on. Try again. Sorry. Sorry, there was an error on my screen that kind of made me think that like my stream had cut out. But it did not. Anyway, so the only reason I got this case for this Raspberry Pi 4 is I thought it was cool looking. But ironically, it was not cool. Like cool, literally. So I did a really stupid thing, and I am being very cognizant about that this time. And that stupid thing is so you can see that I've actually got a fan on top of this Raspberry Pi 4 now. I did not have a fan on it before, and I had the metal case on top of it. And not that these Raspberry Pis necessarily get super hot, but it got hot enough one time that it actually, like, this is a new micro SD card that I put in here, because it got so hot that it actually warped the micro SD card and kind of melted it to the point, like I was barely able to get it out. But like it basically made the micro SD card unusable. So I have learned the hard way that cooling is very important, even in a small form factor like this. So you can see now that I do have a fan on this Raspberry Pi. And to be honest, I don't really know why there even is a lid here, because I would never put this lid on while it was in use. Now, it is nice in terms of I guess protection. If like back whenever I was using this as like my iPad computational device, like being able to travel with this and then slide it back on, I guess you could do that. But all that to say, so cooling is very important for me here. So I'm gonna move this off to the side again. Now I want to show here, and this is gonna be kind of hard to see, but right sandwiched in between there, you can see like these metal pegs over here, back here, like with this black part on the, I guess for you it's the right. That is actually a fan. And so I actually purchased this hat fan combo, and we'll talk about what the hat is here in a bit. From Amazon. It comes together as a bundled package almost, and I actually thought when I was receiving it, I thought I was receiving one part, but it was actually just a standard Raspberry Pi fan that you could buy on like like from a Raspberry Pi vendor. So it's actually two pieces. So it's the fan, and then there's the hat. So that there in the middle is the fan. It's just hard to see because we got the hat on top. Now let's talk about this hat and what a hat is. So hat is actually an acronym. I can't tell if it's an acronym or a backronym. A backronym in the sense that like, so the actual acronym is hardware at the top. Or hat, but like the reason I wonder if it's a backronym is because these hats generally always sit on top of the Raspberry Pi here. And the way that these hats generally connect is, it's kind of hard to see, maybe a little bit here, but well, let me show it at the top. So this strip right up here is like all the pins that like are actually on the Raspberry Pi itself. So let me actually show my screen for a second, because I actually want to... Whoops, sorry about that. All right, so this is a standard Raspberry Pi 5 itself with nothing on top of it. So this is what I was talking about, where it's relatively flat with the exception of like the input-output ports on the side there. But what I was mentioning there is you have these pins off on this side of the Raspberry Pi over here. And this is generally how you would connect a hat. And a hat can support multiple different things. So let me go back to my demo station here. All right, so back to the demo station. So I actually have on top of this a hat that is a multi-purpose hat. So there's two specific things that this supports. The first thing that this supports is the power over Ethernet. Now, by default, a Raspberry Pi cannot be powered over Ethernet. That is what this hat is helping to facilitate. But then the other thing is, so we were mentioning before with like the Raspberry Pi 4 that I'm using a micro SD card. I am actually not going to use a micro SD card. I am going to use something that is more typical in the form of like what is called an NVMe. What would you call that? A storage device? Because it's not necessarily just storage. So I'll go ahead and show it right now. So this is the NVMe storage unit here. And so the way that this will actually work, so this is actually very commonly used. Like if you have like a Steam Deck, this is what by default, like the storage for a Steam Deck. Actually, let me show something down here. So down here I have, this is a Microsoft Surface Pro. It's a couple years old. But if I slide open this little compartment right here, it looks a little bit different, but this is actually the same thing. It is one of these things. So these are very commonly used in smaller computational devices like laptops or Steam Decks and stuff. And then the nice thing about, here, let me slide this out of the way again. The nice thing about this hat here then is you can kind of see on the top where right up here is where this would actually slide in and connect. Now I'm not going to slide it in right now because I still need to do some programming for it and such. But you can see like that's how the whole kind of form comes together as a single unit. So take this times 4. Now, right now, because I've just been doing testing and I wanted to make sure that I have all the stuff properly and I'm not having to do like returns or anything, I've not purchased any other Raspberry Pi. But I think I am going to. I think I'm ready for it now. let's call it a couple of caveats though with my setup. And again, big thank you to Matt and Jared for his help here, because he actually figured this out for me. So a couple things to want to call out here. So you can see that the Raspberry Pi connected to this case here itself has these risers, these copper risers that I'm rubbing my finger along. These were included as part of the mounting kit for this thing right here. So that's nice. The struggle though so when I bought this hat kit, there's actually like an extension piece that I'm rubbing my finger along right here that elevates those pins up to where it can sit on the hat. Let me show the one that it actually came with. This is the one that it actually came with. Now, obviously, we need this thing to be able to slide in here without it like necessarily like hitting the other sides. And so however high this is right here, we need to ensure that it can fit within, that it basically doesn't go beyond this line. And it actually, like this part and this part kind of do, but that part doesn't matter. But if you look at like the included extender that it came with, it exceeds that height quite a bit. And so I actually had to buy like a custom pen extender that's a little bit shorter. And then the other weird thing that you can see here also is that these pins that help to kind of secure the hat on top of the Raspberry Pi. So I was able to, on this side, screw them in just fine. On this side, and I don't know if you could see that well, particularly in this corner, there's actually a gap. And the reason for that gap is I just can't get a screw. I suppose I could find a longer screw that would work for that. And then even on this side, so right here, this white little thing right here is actually where like the power for the fan, and then it's sitting right next to the screw hole there. And I struggled to get it to fit right. So this side and this side are actually not screwed in. I don't know how worried I am about that though. Like if it's screwed on this side, and like these hat pins are so like if I were to try to take this apart, which is why I'm not taking it apart for this stream, it's really hard to get apart. So it's not ideal, but it works. And so I'm okay with that. So I'm going to go ahead and set that off to the side for now. Okay, so that covers like the core computational piece of what's actually going to form the Raspberry Pi here. So everything else is stuff to help support the cluster itself. So I'm going to move some stuff out of the way. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to move this out of the way. By the way, if anybody has any questions, I'm taking questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. I'm going to take a quick sip of my drink first before we keep going. Oh my gosh. FYI, I'm sitting in my office here, and my office is in the basement of my house. It is just so freaking hot here in Illinois right now, even in my basement. So I've got my temperature little thing over here. It says it's 76 degrees in my office. And that's considering I have my ceiling fan blowing above me. I have another little fan blowing over there. It's just that like I have my office door closed right now just because my girls are playing out and I don't want them to be loud or anything. But man, I am getting really hot in here. In fact, you know what? I'm going to turn up this fan. Yeah, it is really hot. Okay, so back to, all right, what do I want to cover next? So let's actually cover power next. So obviously, power is another consideration of what we need to be mindful of here. We need to make sure that, so in terms of power, obviously we need to be able to power the 4 Raspberry Pis themselves. We also need to power on this screen. We'll talk about the screen. We'll get back to the screen here in a little bit. So this is the option that I ended up going with for power. So this is by a company called Blazin 3D. And there's a number of different power options for 10-inch racks that you could buy out there. I like this one for a couple of reasons. Number one is it's obviously you can see you got a lot of different ports. You got ports that would face outward. Ports that would face outward toward the back. You got some on the top. You got some that face inward. And what I like also is that it's even got some USBs ports on the side. Now, I believe that what this company Blazin 3D did is, as the name kind of implies, is I think that this is kind of like a general purpose, like power kind of thing that they purchased, and then I think they actually 3D printed all of this all around it. But I really like this. So this actually, now if I were to get my case back up here. All right, so I'm actually going to go ahead and start mounting some of these things in here. All right, so I'm going to place that there. All right. Now, as I was mentioning earlier, the case itself doesn't necessarily come with enough screws, so I actually did place an order for more screws. So I am only going to do like a temporary kind of screw-in thing here. By the way, I just got this electric screwdriver yesterday from Lowe's, and the reason I wanted it is because like a power drill is really just too powerful for like, what would you call it? Like more delicate things, I guess you'd say. This was $20 at Lowe's. I love this thing. Like it's USB-C rechargeable. It's got a little flashlight there on the end. So this thing's awesome. So I'm just using these silver screws right now that actually came with. I can't remember what it came with, but I don't like the I don't like that they're silver. I like that I would prefer them to be black and more uniform. But like I said, I am waiting for more things to come in. So, all right, that is mounted up in there now. And so I could just plug it in to a standard wall outlet. So you can see we got our standard plug in there. And then I could be continuing to plug things into here. Now, if you noticed, the one downside is, maybe you could see it from this angle. It's going to be kind of hard to see, but you can see kind of the USB ports over here. They're not super accessible once you screw this thing in here, which is why I went ahead and plugged in my USB-C cord before I screwed it in. But, you know, that's an acceptable trade-off for me, I guess. So that's power. Now let's flip this around to the front side, and then we're going to cover the front side. You know what? I'm actually going to set this aside for now, because I want to show something cool. So the one cool thing that I'm trying to do with this Raspberry Pi is like I want to be able to have a screen on the front of it. And this is another Geek Pi accessory that I got on Amazon. So this is a 6.91 inch screen. Now 6.91 inches in not diameter, diagonally. I knew it was a D word. So that's what this is here. Now this is actually a touchscreen, but what I wanted to show here and why I plugged in my Raspberry Pi is yesterday I vibe coded my own little website that I intend on updating over time, but you can get a sense for how this is going to shake out here, hopefully here in a second. All right, so this is it. I am so thrilled with how this kind of shook out. So behind the scenes, this is using the Open Media weather API. And so you can see here, my intention over time is that I would be able to swipe through this screen to be able to see different things. Maybe I want to see, you know, how's the Kubernetes cluster doing, or how's this or that doing. So just for now, I went ahead and just did weather. And so you can see that when I swipe over, then I even get a 5-day forecast. So I think that is so cool. Like I just got this working last night. This was just vibe coded using Codex. But let's go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and unplug this for now from the Raspberry Pi 4. I just wanted to demonstrate that for y'all, just because I was really excited about it. I thought that was cool. All right. And then, I guess there is kind of a plus and a downside about the screen. So the plus side is that it's cool and it's got a touch screen. The downside is that, so this is going to be hard to see, I guess. So you can see here kind of on the back, there's like an HDMI port and there's a USB-C port. The HDMI port only supports display. And the USB-C port is what is intended for power. And so the disappointing thing here is, because this is only, the HDMI port is only display, in order to get the touch functionality working, you have to have basically a second cable plugged into the Raspberry Pi that would facilitate that touch interface. So as you saw connected to my Raspberry Pi here, so I've got the mini or micro edge HDMI cable here plugged into the side. That is what this cable here is doing. And then I have another USB-A to USB-C cable over here. Now, I did find, even with just a Raspberry Pi 4, that this cable was sufficient to provide power, both power and the touch functionality to the screen. But that's just another thing I'm going to have to account for that I didn't necessarily account for before. But anyway, let's go ahead and mount this guy up into, well, I guess I can unplug this. I don't need this anymore. So I was just using my Pi 4 for demonstrative purposes. So let's go ahead and pull this back up. Set this over here. And let's get this. So this is going to sit on the front of the cluster. And I'm going to put it right up at the top here. So I got my screws over. Oh wait, you can't see that. Let me move that over for you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and mount this guy up. There's just something so satisfying about like actually doing something in hardware with hardware here. Just like I said, I've already screwed all of these things in and unscrewed them multiple times just because I find it so satisfying. All right, I'm a little bit distracted trying to talk and screw at the same time. All right, so there's one. This is what I was talking about, the black screws. So you might have seen the silver screws on the back. I prefer to have them all be black if I can. That was stupid of me. It's hard to do when I'm not standing directly over it. Is that not? Sorry. All right, that works. All right, next up, another screw. I'm trying not to stand up here. Okay. But usually I do this when I'm standing up. Okay. And then finally, we got the one last thing. All right. All right, so screen is now mounted. Now let's move on down the stack. So the next thing I want to show, I'm going to set this off to the side for now. We'll come back to that, is the switch. The network switch. So this is a Netgear switch here. As I was mentioning before, this is going to be how I actually provide power to each of the Raspberry Pis using power over Ethernet. And this is also how I'm going to network everything together for like that Kubernetes cluster that I was mentioning before. And I intend on using K3s in case you're wondering about that. So each of the 4 Raspberry Pis will connect into one of these Ethernet ports here. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is because we are using power over Ethernet is you can't just go buy any random switch off the market. You have to make sure that it has the sufficient power needs for this. And so that's what I was kind of mentioning before was I'm glad I bought the deeper case because that's the freaking brick for this switch alone. Like it's a meaty brick. And so I'm glad I got the extra depth in the case to be able to house this meaty brick there. Now, the other thing that I want to show here is this did not come with this device. So this is the mount for this. Now, I actually had to have this 3D printed, and I am very new to 3D printing. I've always been aware of 3D printing. So what I basically did is I found somebody online that had already produced like the 3D schematic for this very specific switch here. And then I found an online online source that would actually do the 3D printing. I am not going to mention what that online source is because I don't know if I can't tell they did not do a bad job. I just can't tell if they did a good job or if this is just like what to expect in general with 3D printing. So what I mean by that is, so you got these, you can see these holes on the side here. There was a bunch of like extra plastic inside of all these holes that I actually had to go through and like file away myself. And then same here along the back edge here. And I thought I had paid for them to do that. And then the other thing here is, I don't know if you can see on the front, like top right here, but it's kind of already starting to chip a little bit, which is annoying. Now it's not a bad job by any means, and it certainly gets the job done. But like, so I'm not going to say which website I end up using because I don't necessarily want to call them out. But I'm not super, like, I would give this a B if I had to give this a letter grade. But again, I'm so new to 3D printing. I don't know if it's just the nature of like, you know, maybe if I would have splurged a little bit more for some higher quality of materials, maybe I wouldn't have this issue, and this is a common thing. But anyway, so this is actually going to hold that switch up into the case. So let's bring our case back up again. We're going to go ahead and mount this up into the case. All right, and as I was just as a something to recap here, so we talked about this being a 4U high case. So basically the 4 U's for me are going to be, so you got the 1 U for the screen, 1 U for the switch, and then 2 U for the actual mounting of the the Raspberry Pis. I think I might end up standing because this is really hard to do sitting down and not being able to look at it from above. There's one. There's two. Oh, shoot. Looking on the wrong side. There's three. I probably could have gotten by with two, just the two, like one in the middle on each side, but I'm going to do four just for robustness sake. And there's four. All right, so there's that. Now, we already kind of covered the Raspberry Pi mounts and stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and mount that part in now, too. Where did it go? Where did I put it? Okay, I'm trying to remember exactly how this goes. Where is the... There it is. Okay, yeah. So this is the top. It's going to slide on here just like that. All right, and then we're going to screw these in. All right, there's one. Two. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you can see here. It is not just a screw that I'm screwing in. It's a screw plus like a plastic washer thing around it as well that the screws came with. Okay, there's three. And there is number four. Oop. All right, there's four. And so that is more or less the front side of the case. Now you can see, as I was mentioning before, if I ever wanted to slide out one of these Pis to work on individually, then we have these screws that you can hand untighten or hand unscrew, I guess you'd say. And then I could take my actual Pi itself here. There's my Raspberry Pi, and then we can slide it on in here, like so. And then we can use these screws and hand tighten it back in. All right. Okay, cool. Now that's essentially it. Now let's go ahead and slide in the switch. Oh, okay. Had just a little thing go flying there. No worries. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take my brick in here, and then I'm going to go, this is going to be harder for you all to see, but I'm going to go ahead and plug it in, and then I'm going to plug it into the back of the switch, network switch here, there we go. Plug that in, and then we're going to slide it on through, like so. Come on. There we go. Tuck that all back in there. I'm going to tuck this other cable in here as well. And let's see if I can turn this on its side, and because I've noticed that sometimes when I turn it on its side, the switch has the tendency to want to fall out. Okay, I think we're good. But I put it in upside down. Gosh, I put in the switch upside down. I was going to say, I thought that was on the other side. That was foolish of me. All right, let's fix that. Okay. Cool, shove that all back in there. Okay, now we should be able to turn it on its side. And that's exactly what I was just talking about. The switches fell right out, which, you know, most people are not going to have this thing on its side, so that's the one semi-deficiency of this. All right, I'm going to turn it on its side just to show you. All right, that's basically the full case here. Now I want to set this down very gently. There we go. Now there is one more thing that is just more of a decorative thing in general, like completely unnecessary, but I don't like the fact that this is all open. So this is another 3D part, 3D printed part that I found from a vendor on Etsy called Rackify. He did a good job. He was a good guy to interact with as well. I just don't have the screws to be able to mount this up sufficiently, but you can see here that it's just going to sit at the bottom just kind of for decorative purposes. It doesn't do anything. It's just a 3D printed plastic little grate-like thing. And that is it. That is essentially the cluster. All right, let me share me again. Here, I'm going to move my microphone back over, so give me a second. Almost there. Gotta move my camera back. Okay, so let's show it. Let's show it from this side. Boom, that's it. And we can see, I'm gonna move it. I'm gonna put this back where it is going to go, which is over here. Come on. Try not to break my great Deku Tree Lego as I do this. And it sits perfectly right down in there. Boom. And if you can kind of see my great Deku Tree Lego that I was trying not to break. All right. Wow. All right. Sorry, I missed some questions. So, wanted to build a Homelab this year, but considering prices for hardware, do you think we should wait for prices to settle down? Okay, so let me repeat this question here that was put in the chat. The question is, I've been wanting to build a Homelab this year, but have been considering the prices right now. Do you think we should wait for the prices to settle down? I sadly do not expect the prices to settle down for the foreseeable future. I don't know how long that's going to be. And the reason the prices are so high is because of all the AI stuff. I would like to hope that the prices will eventually go down. I'm just not very optimistic about it. In fact, I almost think they're going to continue to go up, especially if you've seen like the increases in like PlayStation prices or Xbox prices, or well, I guess Apple just had a whole across the board MacBook update where, you know, all the prices were increased. I just sadly think the prices are not going to go down anytime soon, so that's unfortunate. I wish I would have built this this cluster about a year ago, because I think I would have saved a couple $100 if I would have done it about a year ago. But that's a fair question and a good question. Okay, I think that's all I want to cover for today, though. Again, I do intend on covering the Homelab as part of future streams. I want to do the Kubernetes stuff. I want to be able to set things up with Ansible. I want to move like the MLflow server over there and other things. So I'm really excited about this project. I hope you appreciated this stream. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. And like I was mentioning, with MLflow, we will come back to MLflow again as part of our next stream. So I hope you all have a good day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.